have you ever had any thoughts like, am I actually pleasing my woman? Or maybe you were with a woman and afterwards you hadn't heard from her, she's like, oh, something's come up. Or maybe she just ghosts you completely and you're like, dang, was she really satisfied? Was she really pleased, or was it a thing of she just doesn't want me to know? In today's video, we're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss the 4 levels of sex. And so, the biological level is what you guys all know about. But what if I told you there are 3 other levels that if you don't know about them, your girlfriend may be thinking in her back of her mind, this is a disaster, but she doesn't want to hurt your feelings. So stay tuned, we're going to go right into them. So this all started from a conversation actually I was having with a friend of mine. Previous client became a friend. And this is actually a dude who has a history of, doing well in the bedroom. Used to have women having multiple orgasms, all that stuff. But he called me, right? He's seeing a woman recently. He's like, but all right. She says she's doing great. She, orgasms at least once every time we have sex. But I just don't feel like she's actually enjoying it as much as she's leading on. And so I said, why do you think that? He's like, I don't know, I'm used to the women I'm dealing with having, stronger orgasms. And, she said a little comment in there that probably also fed into his feeling of insufficiency. And so I thought about it, and his concern was just how do I find out if I'm actually satisfying her, and how do I take it to that next level that you'd often hear me talk about, right? We talk a lot about sexual dynamics, something that most guys don't really have people they can talk to about. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to share the answer that I gave him, you guys on YouTube, in hopes that it'll improve your sexual relationships, because I hate to break it to you, your woman will never tell you, right? Unless it's to the point where she loves you and she's like, man, I really want this to work. This has to be fixed. Most of the time, unless it's just absolutely atrocious, she won't tell you. I won't go into too many stories, but we're going to get right into this. So, the biological level, you're probably like, sex, 4 levels of sex. I thought sex was just dick and pussy, and that's it, right? Well, if you think about what sex means, right, what is sex actually, right? Sex is the union between the masculine and feminine. Now, masculine here, I'm going to keep this very basic, a whole different video, simply means the initiator. We'll just use initiator. The feminine is we'll say, the one who's receptive. Right. So we're going to keep it simple and use the masculine being the man, male, feminine being the female. Now this can apply to any dynamic, but we're going to keep this fraction just men who are heterosexual. So the initiator, right? The thing about sex is that the women dictate if sex actually happens, but the men are the one who dictates how good the sex actually is. So a woman says, okay, and we'll go into the 4 levels in a moment, but a woman's experience of the world, she moves through the world, right, magnetizing different, we'll just say men to her. And as she's experiencing these men, as she's in their presence, she's gauging her emotional state, right? And we're going to keep it simple. Do I feel good or not? If it's a unpleasurable experience, it's a negative experience, she'll want to be out of that man's presence. If it's a pleasurable, positive experience, she'll want to be more in that man's presence, right? Now, there are factors beyond just those two things, like, is she in a committed relationship? Does she have some religious reason for, so, that's not all there is to it. But more or less, she'll crave to be in that man's presence, right? And so she craves to be in your presence or craves to have you in hers. That means she's receptive. And this is going to be really key. Sex cannot happen unless the feminine party is receptive, right? Now, the quality of the sex is going to depend on how receptive you can make said woman. So, really pay attention to a woman's receptivity. Now, this is where the 4 levels of sex come in. Because at the lowest level, we have social receptivity. So that looks like you'll have chemistry, right? So if we have social receptivity or social sex, that means you see a woman, for example, you go over to say, hey, my name is Billy Bob, right? She's like, hi, Billy Bob, right? And she's, again, checking her emotional state as you're saying whatever you're saying to her, right? You're telling her about whatever the fuck, Billy Bob's into. And she's gauging emotionally for chemistry. But this is completely surface level. This is what we call public. What happens in public? This is public sex, right? This is you going on a date with her. This is her doing her hair, or y'all walking out at the park, and she's socially saying to the world, you the initiator, she's receptive to it. So in that moment, y'all are having what you can think of as social sex, right? We'll get deeper into this, no pun intended. So then there's what we do in private, right? And this is private, and this is really key, private on the physical level, right? Because that's also what it means. Biological sex, like physical sex, right? And at this level, it's all about pleasure or sensation, right? This is at the body level. So right here is about chemistry, or what you can think of as a reaction. Reaction in public, right? Is she smiling? Is she frowning? Is she still with you? Is she happy to be there? That's the lowest level, right? Then we go to the biological level, which is focused on her pleasure or sensation, right? This is what happens in private and it's physical. The next level is going to be private, mental, right? So another thing you can say, this is private physical, and another delineation would be private, physical, and external. So this is what's happening externally. This is what's happening internally. For both parties, right? So notice we're getting deeper. Again, no pun intended. The biological level, and this is where the man needs to understand. The more positive the experience at each level, the more receptive the woman becomes to you. So at the chemistry level in public, you have a good social interaction, you have a good day, right? She becomes more receptive to you physically, so she becomes more willing to engage in actual physical sex with you, right? Where her core desire is having a great sensational experience on her actual body, right? But then there's something deeper than that, which is the psychological level. Talk about the internal. And it goes from just sensation to actual emotion, right? And we're not talking about necessarily having like some deep emotional connection. While that does enhance sex, and it can, the more times you have sex, the more connected you two are emotionally, it can enhance the experience. You can't take away from it. So the deeper you guys get to know each other, the more connected you feel, well, naturally you're going to have better sex. But that's not what we're saying here. The reason we have freedom there, so we're going to go into the male side, what you need to do in order to improve this. But right now we're just talking about how do you make the woman more receptive? Remember, sex cannot happen unless the feminine partner is receptive. And the more receptive she is, the greater the sexual experience has the potential to be. You still got to do your part, which we'll go over in a moment. We got her reaction, sensation, emotion, then we have immersion. But we're going to get into that in a moment. These levels matter more because very few guys are at this level, right? And it doesn't mean she can't have pleasurable experiences here, but we're here to help you have an elite sexual experience with a woman where she's like, forgetting her name. Maybe that's not a good thing, but, at least you want to have the option, right? If you want to help a woman forget her name, you need to be at this level, right? If you're not, if she still remembers her name after you're done, are you really doing your job, right? So we'll get to this level in a moment, right? The spiritual is slightly different. Right? So what's the question in the room here? Why would a woman not be receptive to a particular man? What would you be doing to decrease her receptivity? Because what's the opposite of receiving? Rejecting. Right? So, at the social level of sex, social level of rejection for a male would look like, hey, I'm Billy Bob. And she's like, no, right? You were rejected. She was not receptive to you, so no sex happened. So she can be socially receptive. Okay, Billy Bob, I'll go out on a date. And I know a lot of you guys can relate. I know I could relate. And I've been at every one of these levels, even the negatives, so plenty of stories on that. The biological level, it's, okay, Billy Bob, I'll go out a date. Billy Bob tries to go in for the kiss, or Billy Bob wants to sleep with her, or whatever the fuck. She's like, no, Billy Bob. Right. So it gets rejected at the biological level, which I think most guys are, this is a whole different video. How to become socially receptive. How do I make a woman socially receptive, physically receptive, mentally receptive, and then spiritually receptive. So Billy Bob, let's say Billy Bob gets past and he's like, okay, we had sex. A guy thinks, okay, we had sex, therefore, amazing, right? She was probably mentally unreceptive. So she was physically there. She might go, because a woman will have sex for a variety of reasons. It's not always because she's that interested in the actual experience. So she may mentally be absent. Or just, we're going to get into that. Just not really there. And so while, on the reaction level, she seems to be reacting well to the sensation level. I mean, you got to have sex, so you're like, okay, I gotta be good, right? But mentally, she's like, right? But let's say mentally, she's also very receptive, right? Then we'll get into the deeper level, which is immersion. Now, really remember those, right? Those are the levels of receptivity for her, right? This is really key to understand. Okay, so now let's get to what you need to do, right? And we're going to get to the freedom part because I know this is a key component that you might be wondering, like, well, how does that work? So, from the male side, usually a guy that's more focused on the social level of sex, he's just more interested in the optics of things. If you ever had a buddy and, I was this guy and I've been at all these levels where on the outside, he's more interested in how it looks like girls respond to him. Right? This is the guy that, maybe out at the club and he's buying bottles, and he wants the optics, the social status that comes from being seen with attractive women, right? He wants them to be socially receptive. He cares more about looking like the man, right? That's very important to somebody at this level. He wants to be seen out with the attractive woman. He wants to have that attractive woman on his arm when he goes to the company Christmas event or the charity event, or very, 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 very concerned about optics, right? And something I actually forgot to mention at this point, I'll actually erase this. At this point, what's going to determine the level of sex your woman experiences is going to be based upon where your focus is. So focus is key. There's a difference between being focused on something and being aware of something. So focus really is concentrated awareness. So let's say you're in a room and I tell you to focus on that chair, right? And there's a chair and you just focused on it. That doesn't mean that you're unaware of the environment. So if something were to move, you probably, what is that, right? So you're aware of the room, but you're not focused on the room. You're focused on the chair, right? And so similarly, when it comes to these stages, in terms of how you're going to initiate the experience with the woman, these are your levels of focus. So the social level, the guy that I just mentioned, his focus is on how other people perceive him, right? How does he look in public? How bad is the girl? Really? So the guys, often on social media, these are the guys that you'd be like, hey man, she's hot. Is she bad? Right? Or they're like, oh, you just need to improve your looks. Or you need to improve, and these things are important. Enhance yourself for your own sake, obviously. Why wouldn't you? But they're more concerned and they're trapped in social sex, and they think that's the highest level, right? Follower count and things of this nature. It's like social. But no amount of followers is going to get you any pussy if you don't know these other levels, right? You can have all the followers in the world, and it seems like in the comment section, this is, right? Remember this about sex. You never see anybody else do it. You never see anybody else do it, unless this is OnlyFans or porn, but I'm sure these guys that are telling you this, you've never actually seen them lay with a woman. So it's all speculation, unless the women come out, and even then, but most of the time it's probably true if the woman comes out. So it's all speculation. Sex is something that happens in private. That's why there can be no such thing as normal sex, right? If you never see what anybody else does, how do you know it's normal? That's a whole other conversation. So the social level, status. Now the biological level, this guy's focus is on his pleasure, right? Think of it as their focus here is, what do I get out of this beautiful woman at the social level? I get praise, I get props, I feel good, right? I'm that guy. And again, I used to do this, right? In my early 20s, I thought that was important. I thought that was the biggest thing. Like, how do other men perceive me? And so, at the biological level, you care about busting the numbers, right? Orgasm. So at this level, on the woman's side, so right here, she's focused on chemistry. Though chemistry is an interesting thing because it doesn't necessarily mean you have personal chemistry. You could have chemistry in the sense that she likes Birkin bags and you buy Birkin bags, and so that's her motivation for being with you. She likes being on a yacht. You're willing to put her on a yacht. She likes going on trips. You like going on trips, taking women on trips. So that's the chemistry there, right? It's just whatever allows her or whatever causes her to be receptive to you. That has nothing to do with actual physical sex. Now, At the pleasure level, she wants the sensation. So this may look like kissing, from anything from kissing all the way up to actual sex, right? On this level, the man in the biological level of sex is focused on his pleasure, his busting and his orgasm. These guys tend to be, and for this I'll share a story actually. One of the things guys do not know is that a lot of times, if a woman cares about you, or just a decent woman, like she's not trying to hurt feelings out here, she won't tell you that she's not pleased, right? She won't actually tell you. I was talking to a woman and she was saying with her ex-partner that he wouldn't last very long, right? So the focus was his pleasure. Not to say, he had no care about her pleasure, but if you're consistently not lasting very long and you do nothing to fix that, it's really hard to believe that her pleasure is that important to you. And so, because he was so focused on his pleasure, her pleasure naturally is going to decrease, right? And so, again, it's about focus, not awareness. So because of that, he didn't last very long. However, because she cared about him, she wouldn't necessarily let it be known in her body language that she was unsatisfied. I wouldn't say unsatisfied because throughout the experience, while the 5 minutes were going on, it was enjoyable. But we'll just say she was under. She was undersatisfied. It could have been a little longer. No pun intended. So, there wasn't even that type of thing. Oh, shit. So, serious business here. This is a college class. Right. Back to how to lay a pipe. Biological. So he was so focused on his pleasure, but she didn't want to lose the relationship just because of that. Plus, with other beliefs that she had, she just figured it out, whatever, right? But this entire time, this guy had the perception of, and probably still to this day thinks, he was doing something. But the reality is he wasn't even, I don't think, in the top 3. It's just, and so right now, you may be with a woman and she's mentally right? And the reality is, guys, particularly if a woman cares deeply about sex, some women are loyal enough to where they'll put up with it. But a lot of times, ask me how I know, they won't. But it doesn't mean they're going to leave you because you may have social sex. She's socially receptive to you. You have money, a lot of cash, or you're married with kids or whatever, right? And so because at this level, there's damn near no pleasure, she'll outsource the pleasure to another man to take care of that need for her while still remaining with this man, right? Or remaining with the partner she's with. So that's actually more common than, but it is what it is. So I don't want that for you, which is why we're talking about this. So you don't want to just be at the biological level where your focus is on your own pleasure. Focus, not awareness. You must always be aware of your pleasure. Now let's get to the psychological level. This is where the freedom comes in. So at the psychological level, this guy actually oftentimes probably has great women give him positive reviews. So at the psychological level, at the ego level, it's about having a good Yelp review, right? It's about, this guy cares about, what is she going to say after I'm done, right? I want to hear her say I'm the best she's ever had. Man, I remember when I was stuck at this stage, right? And it's like, well, if you're really doing work, right? If you're really doing work, because I started to think about it, what's so bad about that, right? Well, the problem is that your emotional state, so your ego, or what's called your self-image, what is that? It's how you think of you, right? But the thing about self-image is that there's a feedback loop. So let's say I thought of myself as really intelligent. I'm going to only do things or put myself in spaces where I can keep that self-image. Well, let's say I'm in a room full of people who are smarter than me, at whatever that thing may be. My self-image or my emotional state would decrease because, dang, I thought I was intelligent, but I just was in a room where I was the dumbest guy there. So I feel bad now, right? Similarly, because now other people's choices and reactions to me control my emotions, so I'm up and down. So if I speak for myself, I remember when I was in this state, and this is actually goes back to the story of my friend. When I was back in this state, all I cared about was the woman's reaction, right? And you have guys like these in the middle of sex, he's like, all focused on the moans, she's screaming, and he's constantly focused on her reaction, right? From a woman's side, at the psychological level, we wrote down freedom here, what she cares about is emotion. What this guy can do usually, or does well, is because he wants to be perceived well, he'll usually do this well, which is give a woman access to the freedom part, right? The psychological part. For women, for their mental state to be receptive, they need to feel, probably the core thing they need to feel is unjudged, right? They need to feel like everything they desire, everything that's pleasurable to them mentally, every fantasy is unjudged, right? You're not like, what you want to do? Or at that point, mentally, right? Because remember, if she's presenting something to you and your reaction is, oh no, either, frankly, anything other than receptive, what she's going to do is feel emotion, rejected, feel wrong, feel undesirable, and close that aspect off mentally. So the real psychological unlock, that real freedom of like, okay, no guards up, I can truly be myself in this space, you will not have access to that. And if that decreases, this decreases. So if she feels mentally constrained, then her sensations are gonna decrease, because she's gonna be focused in her head. She's gonna be worried about, is he judging me? Which will take her out of the experience, which will decrease the sensation of pleasure. Now again, it might not affect the social level, but it also might, right? But the key is to make sure that that woman feels safe and unjudged for her sexual desire. And one trick, quote unquote, you can do is whatever she says is be like, oh, that's no big deal. Right? Usually I don't emphasize tactics, but something a guy can use if he's like trapped at this stage and he wants to, okay, how do I free a woman? Just say it's no big deal. Right? And feel it internally. Right? That will allow that woman the breathing room to go, okay, I can express and experience more, because sex isn't only physical. There's a mental, obviously psychological, emotional aspect to the sexual experience, right? I'm sure you've done something where you're physically there, but you're mentally gone. So she's feeling as if, well, this guy, I feel like he's judging me, or I feel like he's deep down doesn't like my tummy or my thighs. Women are very self-conscious, particularly being in such a vulnerable space. And so the last thing you want to do as she opens herself up to receive you is judge and demean what you see. She will close off and reject, because now she's associating with you negative emotions. When I open myself up to this guy, when I open my legs mentally to this guy, he goes, never again is she gonna open to it. Well, I would say never, but it's gonna be very difficult unless you know what you're doing. So the ego side, this guy is usually somewhat open enough Because remember, he needs that woman to have a positive experience. So he has no incentive to make her feel undesirable or judged, right? Because he's going to get a bad Yelp review. She's going to go, girl, you had some da-da-da-da-da-da. Last thing he wants. Now, maybe you're thinking like, well, what's so bad about that? Right? That sounds like if you can just keep getting positive Yelp reviews, wouldn't that be the perfect place? Well, that's what my friend called me for, right? The reality is, if you're stuck at this level, you're still more concerned about your experience. So here is your status, here's your pleasure, here's your self-image and your ego. How does she see you, right? And if you get with a woman, or you feel like you're in a place where, man, I feel like I always gotta perform, I always gotta, and sex feels like a performance, like I gotta prove it, I know I do. You'll always feel tension around sex rather than really immersing yourself. So you're actually losing a lot of the pleasure from it. And I know this from experience. And she's losing a lot of the pleasure from it. Because as you're in the act, your mind is all focused on, okay, well, she making the sounds. Okay, let me use this trick. All right, let me use my special technique that I usually, like, it's all about, I need her to react the way I need her. I need her. And if she doesn't, you're crushed. And if you lie to yourself about it, you can lie, but you know, right? You're crushed. And even if she had a good experience, the fact that you're pierceable, because if she does say about it, yeah, this is alright, you're done emotionally. And you don't want to leave yourself that vulnerable to allow someone to have that much power over you. Sure, you want them to have a great sexual experience, but this isn't the highest level, right? And so I remember when I realized that I had a run where things were good, and then took some time away from women, and then when I re-engaged, couldn't last for shit, right? And this happened with 3 girls in a row, and I remember by the 3rd girl, because we had sex twice in the same day, it's the same back to back. I remember being so down. I was in the bed the next day just feeling like absolute shit. Cause I'm like, she doesn't get it. This isn't, I don't understand what's going on. I was so focused on what she doesn't get. She doesn't know who I am. And since that day I took some time off and I said, never again. And that's when I got access, and this was by accident actually. I got access to this level. And so how this happened was, during this break, I did this one exercise called the resistance release, which allows you to release all of the, let's put it simply so we don't go the whole video on this, but it allows you to release all of the emotional roadblocks to anything, literally. And I happened to want to remove the emotional roadblock. What I wanted was to be able to have mind-blowing sex in a place where I'm no longer attached or need this need for her to react a particular way. And so that's all I wanted. When I re-engaged back again, I don't even remember how many women in a row said the exact same thing. Now, they didn't know each other, not in like a hiding kind of way, but like, it's not like they knew each other and they were saying. And I remember when I re-engaged the next time, I remember being like completely unconcerned about the woman's reaction. Not in a way where it's going back to this level where it's all about me, but all I cared about, and this was a huge shift for me, all I cared about was the experience. Like, I wanted to be there and just enjoy that woman's body, the smell of her, the sight of her sounds, right? Enjoy the feeling of being inside, all the things, like really immerse yourself. The way I could describe it is if you've ever been doing something, and at a certain point, whether you're listening to a song, whether you're working out, whether you're creating something, and there's a certain moment where you're in what's called a zone. And time, literally, you have no idea how much time passed. It's not like you weren't there, but you kind of weren't there. You were so immersed, you and the activity became one, that it was this experience of, it was like you were there and not there at the same time. Complete immersion, right? And so at this level, very few women actually experience this. Again, a woman can experience pleasure from a man on all these levels. It's about the levels, it's the depth. The deeper you go, no pun intended, the greater the experience, right? And so at this level, you actually take the focus off you for the first time. It's not about what I can get. What can I get from this? I want status. I want to bust a nut. I want an ego boost. You actually reduce, you take the focus off those things. You may be peripherally aware, whether or not you become the Buddha at sex, I don't know, right? I don't know if I'm there. But what I do know is it's drastically reduced, right? The amount of impact a woman's reaction, whether it's, and as I said, in those series of situations, it would be one woman after the other. And this is what really did it for me. They weren't just saying it's the best sex they've ever had. They were saying specifically, and this is really what, these are different people who didn't, was I never even had, they wouldn't even categorize it as sex. It was like I've never even had whatever that was. And what was fascinating to me was that I felt like I was doing the same thing. It wasn't until maybe the fourth or fifth woman where it's like, all of these women are have a secret group chat, plotted to all meet me at separate times, and then you're like, we're gonna tell him the same thing. Or they're all telling the truth. And I'd say to them, listen, I'm not worried about the ego stroke of it. I'm gonna be like, no, you don't understand. And that happened so many times that I was like, something changed, right? And so I started to explore deeper and deeper and so I asked these women a bunch of questions. We talk about past partners. We talk about why the sexual experience is so different. And if I had to put it in a quick kind of sentence, they would say something along the lines of, when it's happening, I feel like I'm out of my body beyond just physical pleasure. And if I had to tie that with where I'm at, because I've lowered the volume of what's in it for me, and I'm in the zone, as we talk about, completely immersed in the experience of that woman, or women, depending, there is no, oh man, it's on my mind. How loud is she? But because of the detachment from that, it causes a whole different level of experience that I've never had prior, and led to some of the most mind-blowing sex of my life. And I was like, yeah. So that's what I was telling my buddy about as all this was happening, which is why he came back to me and he's like, dude, that other level you were talking about, I need to know how to get that. And so the key to that is to turn the volume down on these levels. And you don't even have to turn the volume up. When the volume on these is down, the focus naturally goes to this, right? And it's not just I get it now, I'm gonna focus on her experience so that she can think I'm good in bed, right? Because it's tricky. You'll think you're actually focused on her experience, right? And then you're really just doing it because you want her to you want you to say you're the best you ever had because you want the ego stroke. And so It's tricky. And the method to get rid of it is I'll leave it in the description. Because I was like, well, it probably wouldn't be very helpful if you didn't know how to get rid of this. But it's about removing the emotional attachments you have to a positive woman having a positive reaction to you. Right? As long as you're coming to that, like the biggest thing in the world to you will be, does she think I'm cute or is she bad though? And a whole other conversation about stuff like that. But long story short, in order to get a woman to a place of complete immersion where she literally forgets her identity, right? Then it's going to be required for you to forget your own in that moment, right? Because you're the energetic lead, you're the initiative force. So this will take her to such a deep state of receptivity where, there's absolutely no wall, absolutely no guard up, that you'll be able to penetrate to such a place that she's never been penetrated before, pun intended in that one. And that's what I want for y'all. So I'm in more videos. I can go deeper into the actual individual. This was like a brief overview. Wanted to answer my buddy's question, but also wanted to share this with any guy out there that it will help. My focus with this channel is going to be guys getting better with the actual sexual experience with women, the actual relationship with women, having an excellent internal relationship with themselves. So if that's something you're interested in, subscribe down below or not. And that's all I have for you. See you in the next one.